Hello astrology lovers. In this video I will talk on birth time rectification using father's demise date. This is the continuation of the previous video in which I did rectification or birth time rectification of a person using his marriage date and date of birth of his two daughters. So if you have not watched that video, then I request you to watch that video. His birth details: birth date and day 16th August 1960 Tuesday, birth time 2 a.m. rectified to 1 hours 58 minutes 15 seconds by me, place of birth Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India, time zone and name plus 5:30 Indian Standard Time, latitude 13 degrees 5 north, longitude 80 degrees 18 east, geocentric latitude 12 degrees 59 55.43 north, nakshatra Rohini, third quarter, tithi Krishna Paksha Dasami and Ayan Mash, Khullar hourly 23 degrees 17 45.44 So I will be talking about the same person about whom I spoke in the last video. Rising Lagna is Gemini, Moon in Taurus in 12th house, and if you will watch my previous video you will come to know how I got this time 1 hour 58 minutes 15 seconds. The birth time he provided was 2 a.m. and after rectification I got this time. So in this very video we will discuss his father's death, or how we can rectify a birth chart using father's death date. So his father's demise happened on 4th January 2010 in Puducherry around 7 p.m. On that very day, dasha he was going through was of Saturn, Mercury, Moon, Rahu and Moon. So this is the chart that I rotated from 9th, because 9th cusp is connected to father. So we have to study the chart after rotating it from 9th. His rising sign happens to be Gemini, and 9th from Gemini happens to be Aquarius. However, because we use Placidus system where equal house division does not happen, the rising sign here is Capricorn, because you can see here Gemini appears in two cusps. It not just appears in 5th, also appears in 6th. So because Gemini appears in two cusps and Sagittarius also appears in two cusps, so the rising sign here is Capricorn and not Aquarius. Aquarius happens to be the 9th sign from Gemini. So here we are studying his father's chart, and rising is Capricorn. Now let's move to the first step. That's mahadasha lord must either appear in Lagna or 8th or Badak cusp or position in these houses. So here Lagna is 1, 8th is death, and Badak is 11th. 11th because Capricorn is a movable sign, so 11th from Capricorn happens to be Badak. So as I just told you earlier, mahadasha was of Saturn, and Saturn appears in Lagna and also Badak. So this rule gets satisfied. Now moving to the second rule of birth time of understanding death of father, that's mahadasha lord must relate with 8th sub lord, preferably at star level. So here 8th sub lord is Rahu, and mahadasha of Venus, and Venus and Rahu both in the star of Saturn was mahadasha, and Rahu is 8th subsublord, and both these planets are in the in the star of Venus, so both have connection. Now the third step is mahadasha lord must be strong significator of 1 and 8 along with marak or badhak or both, involvement, commitment and final confirmation. So let's study the star, sub and subsub of Saturn. Saturn star is Venus, sub is Rahu and subsub is Ketu. And these three planets must stimulate cusps, the 1, 8, Badhak and Marak for demise to happen. So Saturn involves Venus, Venus in 1, sublord Rahu appears in Venus appears in 1, 2, then 2 and 7 are Marak, Rahu appears in 2 and 8. 2 is Marak and 8 is death, and Ketu appears in 11th, and 11th is Badhak. So Saturn star, sub and subsub support this event. Then we have to also study Bhukti, Antar, Sukshma and Prana. That's Mercury, Moon, Rahu, Moon. So you have to study these planets also. Let's begin with Mercury, that's Saturn and Rahu. Saturn in 1 and 2 and 11, and Rahu in 8. Then Moon is Moon and Saturn. Moon and Saturn both in 11, Moon in 8, Saturn in 1 and 2 also. Then Rahu is Venus and Saturn. Saturn in 1, 2, 11, Venus appears in 7th, that's 7 and 2, that's Marak. Moon we have studied here, so we will not study again. Then the fifth step, that's studying transit, because any event happens due to the support of transit. So as Saturn is the karaka of 8th cusp, thus karaka of death, thus from Saturn we come to know in which 2.5 years a person may die. On the day of death, Saturn must transit a sign whose sign lord establishes relationship with 8th cusps, subsublord or Badhak, with or without death inflicting cusps like Badhak and Marak cusps, involvement, commitment and final confirmation. So let's check what was the in what Rashi Saturn transited when death happened. On the day of death on 4th January 2010, Saturn was in the Rashi of Mercury. So step 5th is, as Saturn transited Mercury, it must establish relation with Badhak subsublord or 8th cusp subsublord. So Mercury is in the star of Saturn, and Saturn is Badhak here. Also Mercury in the star of Saturn, and Saturn and Rahu both make link, because Rahu appears in 8th as 8th subsublord, and Saturn and Rahu both are in the star of Venus. So Mercury establishes link with 8th and Badhak. Now let's study step 6, 7, 8 and 8, that's study transit of Saturn, Jupiter and Sun. We have to study transit of these planets also, because Saturn is the karaka of death, Jupiter because it's connected to year of event, Sun because it's connected to month of event. So let's study these planets also. Saturn was in the Rashi of Mercury, and Mercury is Saturn and Rahu. So Saturn in 1, 2, 11 and Rahu in 2 and 8. Then Saturn in the star of Moon, Moon and Saturn, Moon in 7, 8 and 11, and Saturn in 1, 2, 11. Then Saturn in the sublord of Moon, and Moon we just studied now. So Saturn was in the Rashi, star and subsub of the planet of these planets to cause death, and in the subsublord of Saturn, and Saturn is Venus and Rahu. Venus is 1, 2, 7 and Rahu in 2, 8. Then Jupiter in the Rashi of Saturn, and Saturn we just studied here. Jupiter in the star of Mars. Mars is Moon and Jupiter. Moon in 7, 8, 11. And Jupiter in 1 and 11. Then Jupiter in the sublord of Venus. Venus is Venus, Jupiter. So Venus wheel club and Jupiter. Venus is 1, 2 and Jupiter in 1, 2, 7 and 11. Venus in 1, 2, 7 and Jupiter in 1, 2, 7 and 11. And then Jupiter in the sublord of Sun. Sun is Mercury and Saturn. Mercury is in 7th and Saturn in 1, 2 and 11th. Then Sun. Sun was in the Rashi of Jupiter. Jupiter is Ketu, Jupiter. So we will club Ketu. So Ketu and Jupiter. Ketu in 11th and Jupiter in 11, 7th, 1 and 2. Then Sun in the star of Venus. Venus we have studied here. Sun in the sublord of Rahu, and Rahu is Venus Saturn. Venus in 1, 2, 7 and Saturn is 1, 2, 11. Sun in the sublord of Mars, and Mars we studied here, so we will not study it again. So we can see Saturn, Jupiter and Sun, all the three planets transited the right Rashi, sub and sub to support this event. Now let's move to step 9, that's Moon's transit, because Moon is connected to day of event. So on the day of death, as Moon is connected to day of event, thus on the day of death, Moon must transit a star that establishes relationship with 8th cusp sub-sublord or Badak Bhavs sub-sublord and simultaneously signify death inflicting houses. So on the day of death, Moon transited Ketu. In the star of Moon was in the star of Ketu, and Ketu represents Saturn, and Saturn appears here. So Ketu also appears here in 11th in Badak. So Moon makes link with Badak. Also, as Ketu represents Saturn, and Saturn and Rahu are connected because Saturn and Rahu both in the star of Venus, and Rahu appears in 8th. So let's also study the Sun. Moon was in the Rashi of Sun. We have to also study transit of Moon. Moon was in the Rashi of Sun, and Sun we have studied here because Jupiter was also in the sub-sublord of Sun. Then Moon was in the star of Ketu, and Ketu is Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter in 1, 2, 11 and Saturn in 1, 2, 11. Then Moon in the sublord of Mercury. Mercury we studied here, and Moon in the sub-sublord Mars, and Mars was studied here because Sun also in the sub-sublord of Mars. So I hope from this video you understood how we can study death of father using a person's horoscope. So I appreciate you took time to watch this video, and if you found this video informative, then please give a thumbs up. Also, if you have any question or query, then please feel free to connect with me with the information mentioned in the description box. Also subscribe to this channel because in the next video I will talk more on this person. These are the books that I referred to make this video. So I wish you have a wonderful day and